Although I really wasn't too popular in elementary school or middle school, I finally made a few friends in high school. I guess I couldn't claim to have been the most popular, but at least I had a few friends to hang out with now. It all started when I skipped school with a guy named Gary one day. Not having much to really do, we went around to the guitar shops and played some guitar. I guess he didn't know that I'd played at first, and when he found out that I did, we ended up spending a lot more time hanging out after. I also met some of his friends, too. We mostly just hung out and played guitar all of the time. It wasn't my absolute favorite thing to do, but I had friends for the first time, so that was cool. One Friday at school, Gary, who lived with his grandmother, told me that she was going to be out of town for the weekend. He said he was going to have a couple of guys over, and that I should be there as well. Of course, I was happy to have something to do. Gary's grandmother lived right on the edge of town. It was a 2-story house right next to the train tracks. Gary lived in the attic, and that's usually where we were when we were hanging out and playing guitar. I really didn't know all of Gary's friends, so I was feeling a bit strange about being around all of these new people. We stayed up really late playing guitar and hanging out for the first night there. It was pretty nice, but there was this one guy who was freaking me out a little bit. His name was Ken, and he was just a bit weird. He didn't really play the guitar at all. He also didn't talk much, which I thought was a bit weird. We were all up in Gary's room, so we were all sprawled out on a few pieces of furniture. I was lying down on the bed, when at one point, the guy Ken reached over and pulled the mattress up. Without actually asking for Gary's permission, he got out his dirty magazines and began looking through them, whilst all the rest of us just continued playing guitar. To make things even weirder, he didn't really interact with any of us whilst he was looking at the magazines. However, I would occasionally catch him looking up from them and staring directly at me. He would be smiling and just looked unpleasant. Even though it was pretty warm up there in the attic, we all couldn't help but drift off to sleep at some point. It wasn't unusual, but I had a hard time sleeping in Gary's bed. I was uneasy and woke up once. I was surprised to see Ken was still up though, and he was still checking out those Jag mags. He was staring at me with just the most unpleasant grin. I immediately just closed my eyes, unsure if he was aware that I'd gotten up. The next time I woke up, he was still at it. I stumbled out of the room, mumbling something about needing a glass of water. When I was downstairs, it was much cooler than the attic. I decided that instead of staying up there, I was just going to crash on the couch. I told myself I'd done it because it was cooler, but I did it because I really just didn't like Ken. He rubbed me the exact wrong way. I quickly fell asleep and was woken up later when I heard someone fumbling around in the kitchen. I figured it was one of the guys getting up to get a glass of water. I just flipped around and tried to go back to sleep. I woke up later again because now I felt the couch moving. I must have turned around in my sleep because I was no longer facing the back of the couch. I looked and immediately noticed what was moving it. Ken was sitting on the floor with his feet braced up against it. He had his pants down and was jerking off with one hand while holding a knife in the other, and he was just staring at me. I was really freaked out now, but I don't think he noticed that I'd opened my eyes. With him holding the knife, I really didn't want to shock him or anything, so I closed my eyes and pretended to be asleep. However, it was hard to think about anything other than what this freak was doing. I just held my breath and tried to wait until it was over. When it was, I felt him take his feet off the couch and stand up. I then felt the tip of the knife on my back as he traced it along the side. I prepared to be stabbed, but thankfully I wasn't. After a minute, he took the knife back to the kitchen and walked back up to the attic. I slipped out of the house and went home alone. I couldn't be in the same house as that freak, and when I told Gary about it, he went ballistic. I never saw that guy Kevin again, actually. Oh, and just so you know, this isn't anti-gay or anything. In fact, I don't think Kevin was even gay at all. He was just strange. I used to have friends over at my house for sleepovers a lot when I was a kid. I enjoyed it, but they were always coming over to my house. I guess my parents were always happy that I had friends, but were unsure why I never went to another friend's house for a sleepover there. I guess they wondered why I was insistent on always being the one hosting. Honestly, I can't even tell you why, thinking back on it. I guess I just always felt more comfortable inside my own home. Even when we went to visit relatives, I just always had a hard time sleeping in another bed. When I was around 12 years old, my friend Bobby's mother would not let him come over and spend the night, but she told him it would be alright if I came over and spent it instead. I was really in the mood for a sleepover, so I decided to just go ahead and do it. The night actually went really well. Bobby's mom went to bed early, but she allowed us to remain up later and watch movies. We of course watched a few scary movies without her permission. Bob assured me that his mom slept like a rock and would not be woken up by the movie, but by the time we were done, both of us were tired and really, really scared. "Hey, you want to try doing the Candyman thing?" Bobby asked me. I guess I should have mentioned that the last movie we'd watched was Candyman. I was too scared to actually want to do it, but also didn't want to seem like a wuss in front of my best friends. We went into the bathroom with the lights on, recited the name Candyman 5 times. We paused before the last one. I guess we were trying to test one another to see if we would actually go through with it. Eventually, we finally managed to get it out. Then Bobby flipped off the light, and of course, nothing happened. Even though nothing happened, though, we were both still generally frightened when we got into bed. We talked for a little while and then went right to sleep. I woke up feeling quite a bit thirstier than I could have ever imagined. Getting up, I stumbled out of bed and downstairs, while not turning on any light at all. When I walked into the kitchen, I finally turned the light on. Immediately, I saw a man, a huge man, at the far window. Actually, he was coming through the window. He was halfway in and half out, and he was now looking right at me. I couldn't have waited there too long, but it seemed like forever. I was terrified, and much more terrified than I had been when we did the Candyman thing earlier. I began thinking, even though it was crazy, that it was the Candyman showing up late. I was tired, so my thinking could not have been rational. But before the man could manage to squeeze all the way through the window, I screamed and ran in the other direction, and up the stairs back to Bobby's mother's room. I pounded on the door. Bobby had finally woken up and came into the hallway before his mom opened the door as well. She looked at us and then suddenly passed us. Both Bobby and I turned and noticed the man reaching the top of the stairs. Quickly, she ushered us into the room and locked the door. She called 911 and then grabbed her gun from the closet. She told the man who was now rattling the door that she had a gun and would use it. That didn't deter him at all until she fired off a warning shot. Then he ran off. When the police got there, it turned out that Bobby's mother knew the man. He was an ex who was now stalking her. He had violated a restraining order to get back into the house and get her. He was very quickly arrested, and I never had a sleepover at anyone else's house ever again. You would think that if people actually listened to these horror stories, no one would ever babysit or deliver pizza ever again. There were just so many scary horror stories that seemed to all be related to one or the other. Mine has to do with babysitting. I normally babysitted for this family who had 2 young boys. They had the most beautiful house I had ever seen in my life. It was great. It was also out in the country, so it was always very creepy. The parents had to occasionally go out of town, and this time they were going to be at a wedding, so I would be at the house for several days. Now, I had been over to this house many, many times. I was used to it even though there weren't any nearby neighbors, so it was weird that on the second night, while I was watching a movie with the 2 boys, there was a sudden knock at the door. This hadn't happened ever since I had begun watching them, so confused, I got up and walked over. As I looked out the window before opening it up, I quickly saw one of the creepiest looking men I had ever seen in my life. Keeping the chain on the door, I opened it slightly and then asked if I could help him. The man asked me if the boys' parents were home. I wasn't about to let him know they were out of town, so I told them that they had temporarily gone to the store. I asked if I could leave a message for them. He declined, asserting that he wanted to deliver this message himself. He said he would come back later. About an hour or so later, the man came back to the door. He asked me once again if the parents had come back yet. I told him that they hadn't. He still wouldn't give me the message, but he did request to come in and wait for them. I told him I couldn't let him in, obviously, and he would just have to come back later. He protested, insisting that it wasn't easy to be constantly coming back and forth just on the chance that he would miss the parents once again. I insisted, though, that he not be allowed in the house. I could tell he was pretty upset and left right away. I was expecting the man to come back later, but he didn't come back for a few hours. It was finally time to put the kids to bed. They'd gone to sleep rather easily, so I went to watch more television. Really late, at about 11 p.m., I heard a knocking again at the door. I walked over to it and looked through the window. Surely enough, it was the man once again. Leaving the chain on the door, I opened it slightly. He asked if they were home once more. I didn't want him to know they were out of town, so I told him that they were, and that they'd already gone to bed. I asked again if I could leave a message. The man at this point got very visibly angry. I wasn't sure what to do, but I told him I wasn't going to wake them up. With speed I didn't know he could have had, the man reached through the opening of the door and grabbed my arm. He pulled it out of the door. "Let me in, or you're dead." The man screamed at me, "You're going to bed dead." I tried pulling my arm away from him, but he held steady. He repeated the threat over and over again. He gripped me hard, knocking my head against the door more than once. I then noticed he'd let go with one of his arms. He grabbed a knife out of his jacket, and I freaked out. Figuring I only had one chance, I did what he was doing to me. I was able to knock him off balance by pulling his head towards me to hit the door. He let go of me and gave me enough time to pull my arm back in, shut it, and lock him out. I then ran and called the police. I was worried the man would try to break in once again, but he didn't. He must have realized that he'd blown his only chance. The police came, and I had to call the parents, and they flew back immediately. They had no idea who the man could have been, and no one knows, even to this day. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. All the copyright strikes are removed now, so we can get back to business as usual. I'm sorry I haven't been posting as much lately. I've just been really distracted with Monster Hunter Rise, I'll say. But I will get back to posting normally as soon as possible. Thanks to my friend KillerOrangeCat for letting me use the stories from his subreddit in this video. He's been helping me a lot by letting me use some of his stories lately, so be sure to check him out. I'll leave a link to his stuff in the description, and he does really good scary stories as well. They're all really unique, and most of them are original because he gets them himself personally through doing interviews and stuff, so if you guys would like to send in a story or you have a story you'd like me to read, links to all of my social media will be in the description below, including links to my Gmail, Facebook, and Twitter accounts. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is, the type of story it is, if it has one, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. If you're curious about the art used in this video, I have links to my artist friend in the description below. He makes really good stuff and he does commissions, so be sure to check him out if you like his stuff. And as always, links to the music used in the video will also be in the description in the order which it appears in. Thank you guys so much for watching, not too many updates this time, and I hope you guys have a great day.